Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, The Intersection of Safety and HR, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Michelle Wilcox and I will be your moderator today, and I will also be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio, your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again at the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear. Then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Comments and questions are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenters will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of upcoming webinars covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. In addition, we offer mandatory preventing sexual harassment training on June 17th. With that, let's begin today's webinar. Our presenters today are Erica Baird and Deb Beddoe. Erica Baird is the Director of Risk and Safety Services. She has over 20 years of experience in the insurance and safety industries. She has enjoyed working with a wide variety of industries, including construction, retail, manufacturing, education, agriculture, and service industries. Erica is a frequent presenter and speaks on numerous safety topics, from hazard communication to proper lifting techniques. She co-presents The Intersection of Safety and HR and has led several seminars of safety leadership. Erica has a bachelor's degree in psychology and Spanish, an associate's degree in occupational safety and health, and has earned a number of designations in insurance and safety, including ASP, CPCU, and ARM. Deb Beddoe is a senior professional in human resources, and her professional experience spans over 30 years. 12 years ago, she founded her company called Your Ops Manager that manages the business operations of small businesses, including all of the elements of human resources. As an advisor to companies of less than 50 employees, Deb has been advising employers about discrimination, retaliation, and sexual harassment prevention since 2010. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the presentation to you, Erica.
Thank you. There we go. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining Deb and me today to talk about safety and HR. We are both pretty passionate about this subject because we've seen over and over again the difference that it makes when both safety and HR work together. And then on the other side of that, the problems that are created when they try to operate separately in like silos, right? So before we jump into that, I do have to cover this content disclaimer, right? This is just saying that even though we're covering a lot of information, we are not providing any consultation or creating a client relationship. This is general information that you can apply and hopefully use. With that, I'm going to pass right over to Deb.
Thank you, Erica. Nice to have so many participants today. So when we think about safety and HR in our workplaces, it can be hard to see how those two are very interwoven into the success and profitability of an organization, or even with each other, because oftentimes these two departments don't even work together on their strategic plans, making it so that these two departments really are existing in their own silos within an organization. But the organization and its employees would benefit greatly from seeing how these two departments intersect and how one can help the other, which in turn helps everyone in the organization. When we think of HR, some of the top items we might think about them being responsible for are hiring and firing employees, improving overall retention, supporting the workforce and the supervisors and complying with regulations?
Yeah, so while both HR and safety departments care about employees, we have different methods of reaching company goals around how we protect employees, ensuring profitability, and protecting the company's reputation. So for safety, the focus is typically on implementing strategies designed to prevent incidents, right? That could include training employees or enforcing safety rules. The safety department also has to be aware of OSHA regulations, and we need to ensure that operations are compliant with those regulations.
So let's look at how safety and HR do intersect. Each department needs to hire and train employees. HR usually plays a role in the following aspects. They do the interviewing and the hiring process, they do the new hire orientation, discipline actions, recognition of performance, both good and bad, regulatory compliance, consistency for the organization, but safety is also a key part of all of those items. Erica, how can safety participate in these aspects of HR?
Actually, safety can be heavily involved in each of those aspects, any part of the employee-employer relationship. And it's important to include and talk about safety culture at every level. So starting with the hiring process, if our goal with safety is to protect our employees, the last thing we want to do is hire somebody who isn't going to fit into our safety culture. So HR looks at whether that employee is going to fit the workplace culture already, right? So when they're going through the process, they're talking to somebody who's interviewing for the job, they're going to have a conversation with them to see if they fit the workplace culture. But if we can also get a feel for how they fit the safety culture, that can make a huge difference. So HR can ask questions to get an idea of whether or not this person has any safety knowledge, if they have some kind of exposure to safety rules, if they've seen training, how they've reacted to those safety rules and training. And then once that person's hired, that new hire orientation should focus really heavily on safety as a company value. So we want to reinforce from every level of the organization, from the company president to supervisors to their safety manager to even their coworkers, that safety is a value in the organization. And then we have to enforce safety, right? So if somebody's not following those safety rules, we have to address that. The company's disciplinary action plan should apply to safety the same way that it applies to somebody coming in late for work or not following any other company rule, right? So coming in late for work, not wearing your safety glasses, we treat it exactly the same. Then the other side of that is we want to recognize employees for doing the right thing. When safety and HR work together to both recognize and discipline employees, that consistency helps to reinforce safety expectations. And consistency is important as it relates to other departments too. So if you have a production crew that follows one guideline and then a maintenance team that follows a completely different one, you can run into issues with that. So consistency between the two, make sure that everybody understands the rules, that they are applied the same, and it helps you with compliance. Regulations can affect safety and HR differently, but the importance of staying on top of changing standards and meeting or exceeding what's required is the same between both departments.
Okay, so let's go into our first polling question. Does your organization have the following? A, interview hiring process, B, new hire orientation, C, disciplinary action, D, employee recognition, or E, I'm not sure. And we'll give it a couple seconds here to let people have a chance to go ahead and mark their answers before I provide the results. I'm going to wait until we get to about 60% voted. And thank you all for participating. We appreciate that. Let's see here. Okay, so let's go ahead, and it looks like 94% say hiring and interview process, 88% say new hire orientation, 83% say disciplinary action, 63% say employee recognition, and 3% say I'm not sure.
Okay, so we're seeing everybody's doing the interviewing and hiring, and they're incorporating some of these other items, which can really make a difference in terms of getting your safety culture and establishing expectations. So I'm gonna talk about COVID-19. Just bear with us. I know it's the last thing that any of us want to talk about. But when it comes to talking about human resources and safety departments working together, this is a really great example. So I'm going to drag everybody back to January and February of 2020 just for a minute, because I want to remind you what we were all dealing with at that point, right? So we had been watching China basically get ravaged by this virus that no one had ever seen before and no one really knew anything about. We knew it was contagious, that was pretty obvious, but we had no idea at that point how it was being spread. And if you were like me, we were kind of hoping that it wasn't going to come to the United States. And then there were a couple of cases that popped up and it was basically here, right? So different states tried to provide direction. They started with just shutting everything down because we had this theory that if we went for 2 weeks without interacting with other people, then the virus would run its course and we could just go back to normal. So all but essential operations closed their doors. But when that didn't work, we had to figure out how we were going to reopen businesses and keep employees safe. And do you remember who did that? That was safety and human resources working together to put together plans that could bring everybody back to work and then try to do it in the safest way possible. So every company was dealing with something that was a little bit different, and all of us were looking to the CDC for guidance. And the guidance at that point was to wear a cloth mask and to stay 6 feet away from others. So we redesigned workstations and we added partitions to separate people from anyone they had to talk to face to face. We mandated the use of face masks. We trained employees so that they knew what was required, and then we enforced all of those rules. And the situation kept changing because then we found out that the virus was airborne and 6 feet might help a little, but it really wasn't doing us as much good as we had hoped, and that those partitions that we had all installed weren't very useful at all. And we got to know all the different types of masks that are available because we were trying to find masks for employees to wear, and there was a shortage at that point, even for healthcare workers, right? We wrote plans for COVID prevention in states where that was required, and then every time they changed the rules, we had to go back and modify that plan. And the truth is it was exhausting, but HR and safety departments got through it together, and together we prevented illnesses. There are some companies that had only a handful or even no work-related COVID illnesses because of those plans that were developed. And so this is a really good example of what can be accomplished when safety and HR work together.
Well, COVID-19 was a great example of HR and safety working hand in hand, but at a safe distance, as Erica has just discussed with us. But why might it work so well? Part of that is because everyone was talking about it. We had reminders in front of us from when we woke up until when we went to bed and every moment in between. And these consistent reminders, along with ever-changing government controls that needed to be implemented, helped to serve as ongoing enforcement of keeping our distance, washing our hands, and using sanitizer, as well as using other forms of personal protection equipment. These controls and actions pretty much became second nature. Humans do very well with repetition. And regardless of what we've learned 5 years later, we can look at the COVID situation of 2020 as a great example of HR and safety working together to help control a hazard and protect employees.
And with that, we have another poll there, Michelle.
Yeah, we're going to move on to our next polling question. How involved in HR is HR and safety at your organization? A, they participate in facility walkthroughs. B, they are involved in disciplinary action. C, they participate on the safety committee. D, they are a separate department. Or E, they are involved in all of these. And again, we appreciate your participation. And I'm going to give it just a couple of minutes here. It's hard to believe that COVID was already 4 years ago. It just seems like yesterday and a bad dream. I don't know about anybody else.
It doesn't seem that long ago. I think you're right.
Okay, so I'm gonna wait until we get about 70% voted before sharing the answers. Here we go. So we've got, hold on a second. So we've got 34%, they participate in facility walkthroughs, 64% majority, they're involved in disciplinary action, 45%, they participate in safety committee, 40% say they are a separate department, and 38%, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and 38% say they are involved in all of these.
Okay, that's good. That's a helpful way for us to kind of get a feel for how you guys are set up and how divided your departments are right now. So I've got listed here 3 primary safety duties, right? Developing written programs, safety committees, and facility walkthroughs. So traditionally, these are safety roles, but I want to point out how engaging HR into each of these functions can help to improve your overall results. So let's start with safety programs. When you're writing a safety program, you always want to reflect your company's specific operations. And it's helpful to be consistent with other programs that are already in place. If you've ever had the experience of being asked to write a safety program and getting started on it, only to find out that that program actually existed in human resources, or that human resources was working on developing the same program, it can be pretty frustrating. Sometimes you find out that HR has that program in place, right? And you just didn't have it with your safety documents. The HR department had it. If you have to develop a new safety program, or if you're updating an old one, it's really helpful to reach out to HR, have that conversation, and then once you have something put together, have them look it over. You want to let them know what you're working on so that you can find out if they already have something in place, and then you want to get their input so that you can make sure that your program is in line with all the other company policies. That consistency is really important for your employees because it reinforces the concept that safety is a value within the organization when your safety programs are in line with other company policies and everybody's on the same page. Now, the safety committee is another place where HR can really help. So as you're in that committee and you're discussing safety issues and trying to figure out how you're going to correct a hazard or what to do about a recent incident, your human resources department representative can provide you with guidance to ensure that whatever strategy you implement to correct the situation, it's in line with other company policies. And they can also provide feedback on regulations specific to human resources that might force you to change your strategy. It is far better to know about this in advance before you implement something so that you don't have to turn around and change something you just put in place. That's really confusing for employees. So having those conversations, so important, and getting them involved in that. It can also be helpful for human resources to do facility walks with you. It helps them to better understand your operations and the working conditions, and it helps them with hiring and answering questions from prospective employees. That lets you add also a new set of eyes to the inspection process, right? Because as they're walking through with you and asking questions so that they understand how things work, they might point out something that you've been walking past for years. So having a different point of view on those walks can also help you to better protect employees.
So let's look a little deeper into how HR and safety intersect. For the hiring process, HR can build some questions into the interview formats, such as, what was safety like at the last company you worked for? What role did you play in safety in your previous positions? Describe a safety situation that you had in a role, and what was your role? If a candidate has a negative answer or makes statements that show that they may view safety in a negative manner, then this might not be a good candidate. If your core values are around safety, you want to find those employees who share those core values. So how else can HR help in filtering candidates so that hiring managers have the right person for the job? One way is to set up pre-hire medical or drug screenings. And with proper job descriptions, HR can help develop medical requirements that are job specific. So when you do this, you should have an occupational clinic already selected to conduct the pre-hire tests. By having these requirements and processes in place, HR can help managers ensure that they have a good candidate for the position for which they're hiring.
The best time to establish that safety is a value at an organization is at the very beginning. So showing a united front is one way that you can do this. As an employee goes through training, they receive an employee handbook and they get a bunch of HR policies that are covered in the meeting, right? But you want safety to also be a part of this session. You want to integrate your injury and illness prevention program or other safety programs, your company safety roles, and any safety expectations into that initial introduction to the company because it sets a foundation for what you're doing. Organizations handle orientation differently depending on their size and the number of people that are hired at any given time. But one way to show a united front is for everyone to be consistent in the messaging about safety. So sometimes HR does the full orientation and then a supervisor picks up on the job training, or in other organizations, safety is more involved in presenting the program for each new hire or to groups of new hires. In either case, the message from the executive level to HR to the safety department and that employee supervisor has to be the same. Safety is integral to our operations and every employee plays a role. set out the company's expectations for safety, including how it ties to disciplinary action. And ask new employees to contribute to your safety culture by telling their supervisor if they have any safety concerns and encouraging them to ask questions as they go through training to make sure they understand how to do their job duties in the safest way possible. Now, if you do have an employee who raises concerns, it's really important to investigate them and then follow up with that person. Even if you investigate and you don't find a hazard, you want to go back to that person and explain what you learned and how it will be addressed, or why you don't consider it a hazard, and any precautions or guidelines or procedures that are in place to keep them safe. Having those conversations reinforces how important it is for them to communicate with you and encourages them to do it again.
Sorry, I was muted. As with nearly everything we know about or do, the more we know, the better our preparations, the better the outcome, and the smoother the process. So the HR team should have the following processes in place before an accident has happened. What clinic is used? Who provides the transportation? Who needs to be notified? Is this an incident need to be reported to OSHA? Managers should be trained on all of these items, and they should know where to find these resources quickly. As with many things in life, sending out reminders and providing updates and refreshers on a regular basis is highly beneficial.
So Deb just talked about how important it is to have a plan in place when an accident happens. Everybody needs to know in advance what they're supposed to do so that they're prepared. And that idea also extends outside of your organization. So typically when somebody's injured, claims management is handled by human resources. But by working together to establish policies for return to work, you can reduce the number of indemnity claims you have and reduce your claim costs overall. So this should start with the clinic that you use for treating employees. You want to share your policies and procedures with others who can have an impact on claims after an accident occurs. So the clinic should know that you have a policy to bring employees back to work as soon as possible. And to make their jobs easier, you can provide them with a copy of your job descriptions, or you can agree to send one with the employee when they go for treatment. That helps the medical provider to see what the physical capabilities are for the job, so they know what the employee needs to be able to do their job properly. And that can help them with designing restrictions for returning to work, or figuring out what exactly they are able to do in their role. If they know that you want to bring everyone back as soon as possible and that you're going to provide modified work for them, then they're only going to take people off work if they really can't work at all. And that can help to impact goals that you both have, both HR and safety, as far as reducing the cost of claims and bringing employees back to work so that you don't have to temporarily fill their position. It's also helpful to have a good working relationship with your fire department. And I'm not talking about that annual inspection that the fire marshal does. The fire department will often help you with training employees to use extinguishers, and they can be very useful in determining how to meet building codes and fire safety requirements. Beyond that, though, it's important for them to be familiar with your facility so that if there is a serious injury, then they can respond appropriately because they already know where to go, they know what the building layout looks like, and what types of hazards they might encounter while they're on site. That enables them to do their job more quickly and to get to your injured employee faster. And that relationship can also help to improve your safety compliance.
Okay, let's go on to the next polling question. My organization does an accident investigation after which of the following? Near miss incidents, property damage incidents, injury incidents, none of the above, or all of the above? And we'll give our attendees a minute here just to get their votes in. And it looks like the majority said 60% is all of the above. Then we've followed with 43% of injury accidents, 33% property damage incidents, 13% near miss, and 2 none of the above.
Okay, definitely doing incident investigation is helpful. It's something that we can learn from. So it's always something that we encourage, right? So once you have an accident and an employee is injured and they require medical treatment, then you're going to have to file a claim. And at that point, somebody has to be responsible for managing the claim, right? And then somebody else has to investigate the incident, right? So you want to always have a clear procedure, and you want the two parties to know that it's important for them to communicate, because the information that can be learned during the accident investigation can actually impact the claim and vice versa. So for example, if the accident investigation determines that the employee was under the influence of drugs or alcohol when they were injured, that could be a determining factor in how the claim is handled. And on the other hand, if the injured worker went to the clinic after cutting their finger, but the claim comes back and indicates that the employee has a sprained ankle, then the investigator needs more information about how that incident occurred, because something's probably not adding up. So often human resources manages the claims while the safety department investigates the incident, but making sure that the employee is properly cared for and brought back to work requires both. So when an accident investigation is completed, the findings have to make sense to everyone, right? In order for HR to understand the findings from the investigation, they might need a good understanding of the operations, which they would get from doing those facility walks that we talked about earlier and interacting with other employees, but it can also help them when you do the investigation together. From a safety standpoint, having somebody else you can bounce ideas off during an investigation is super helpful, but discussing it also makes sure that you're both on the same page with what went wrong and what needs to be done to fix it.
Well, now we get into some of the more human aspects of how human resources can help control losses. So communication is key with all of your employees, and it should be a joint effort. A lot of this falls on HR, but safety and the employee supervisor can also support this effort. If the employee thinks or feels that the company doesn't want them back or views them in a negative manner, this can create barriers to the employee's recovery and return process. Heck, the barriers may not even really exist, but they can be imagined to exist, and then that could cause the return to work to become delayed. If the employer shows compassion for the employee, it can really go a long way towards fostering positive feelings and positive interactions. Don't stop communicating with an injured employee just because they have a work comp claim. And a simple way to check in with an employee is by sending them a get well card. Get their supervisor or their safety team to have their coworkers sign it. Or call them and see how the medical visit went. Are they comfortable with the medical treatment? Do they need assistance with their claim? See what you can do to help the situation. Let them know that they're still important and that based on the doctor's requirements, the company is looking forward to them returning to work and will follow any restrictions that the doctor recommends. One of the best ways to make sure the employee feels important is to have their supervisor involved in these periodic check-ins. Their relationship with the company is primarily through their supervisor, so maintaining that relationship is really important. Keep track of their treatment information and all of their timelines. Set follow-up reminders with their medical provider. Also, set follow-up reminders to touch base with your employee and the claims manager. If the company doesn't have a job that fits within their restrictions, consider partnering with an outside agency to help with the return to work process and also the accommodation restrictions. The safety committee can help with coming up with ideas for return to work based on an employee's restrictions.
So Deb mentioned some really great things about supervisors' roles and how they have that relationship with employees. When an employee hears from, say, an HR person who they don't really know and they're following up with them, sometimes they're not as comfortable. But having their supervisor reach out and or using a greeting card, sending them a get well card, is a great way to let them know that people care for them and care about them coming back to work. And sometimes that makes a huge difference. Sometimes employees, when they get hurt, they think that they are, a bother, or they're not important to the company, or that they don't feel like they're being treated right. But having reestablishing and maintaining their relationship with their supervisor can really help to make them realize how important they are, that the company wants to bring them back, and it can help with the claims process. It just helps it go a little bit smoother.
So as the employer, it's important to stay in communication with the claims manager as well. You stay informed by communicating with the insurance company. You have all your paperwork in order. You share your concerns and anything learned in the accident investigation that may be relevant to the claim. Notify the claims manager if other employees report red flags. It's up to the insurance company to decide if something is compensable. It's not up to you, but you are responsible for keeping the insurance company informed. The insurance company will determine if red flags can be further investigated based on the law. Follow up on the status of the claim until it's closed. And by staying actively engaged with the employee, the clinic, and the claims manager, HR can help get the employee back to work sooner and the claim closed in a timely manner. By doing these things, HR can help to reduce the total cost of the claim, as well as reduce the likelihood of a litigated claim. Also, you learn a lot about what caused the accident to start with, and therefore you can implement prevention measures for the next time.
Okay, moving on to another polling question. Does your organization have the following? Interview hiring process, new hire orientation, disciplinary action, employee recognition, or I'm not sure?
Hey, Michelle, I think we did that one. I think this one's
Yeah,
a free flow question.
Oh,
It's
this one? Uh-oh, hold on.
That's okay. This one's just, there's no poll, it's just a free flow. What can an HR manager, what can HR or a manager do to help an employee return to work sooner? And we just kind of want to get your thoughts as the audience participation, what you think the HR department can do to help get employees to work sooner after an accident.
And I'll monitor the question box if everybody wants to give us some insight. I'll be happy to share that with the presenters.
It's always great to hear from people who attend these because sometimes they have great input or experience, or they've had something happen within their company that was a success. So we can all learn from each other.
Somebody said have policies and procedures around communication when out of work.
Yeah.
Be kind and check in often. Offer alternate responsibilities or tasks for them to come back. Somebody says we always call or talk to the injured employee specifically about light duty and return to work. Make sure they are attending their physical therapy. Establish a comprehensive return to work program that includes regular communication with the employees, coordinating with their medical provider, creating light duty assignments based on the restrictions. Yeah, there's all kinds of good stuff in here. Ensure that you are motivating the employee physical and mental health.
Those are great.
Well, I heard a lot of really great ones. I think communication is key. Communicate often and early, especially about the employees' plans about their return to work. And also, don't forget to communicate with their healthcare provider regarding any accommodations that the employee might need. And I really like the one to offer transitional work with lighter tasks or modified duties, because that encourages the employee that you really want them to come back.
Yeah, those are all great. So thank you guys for contributing there. All right, so HR can help us with some guidelines, right? So managers and supervisors have a lot of responsibilities. They have to meet production requirements, they have to maintain equipment, they're supposed to be making sure employees are safe. And safety in and of itself is a lot to handle, especially in a company that doesn't have a dedicated safety department or person, right? So new managers and supervisors, they're not always aware of all of the responsibilities that they're taking on when they accept a promotion. When a person transfers from one position to another, they really need to get some training so that they understand their new job duties. And a lot of times that comes from HR. So in terms of safety, managers and supervisors are responsible for enforcing safety rules, training employees, and recognizing correcting hazards. And beyond that, they have to take the time to listen to their employees and address their concerns. Going past ensuring that managers understand their responsibilities as it relates to employee safety, it is also helpful to provide them with resources and guidelines that they can follow as far as how to handle different situations. And I think accidents are a great example for this, right? When an employee gets injured, you're dealing with an emergency. And it can be really jarring depending on what's happened, right? So if a manager has a policy that they can fall back on that supports HR's needs and make sure the employee is getting the care that they need, it makes the entire situation less stressful for everybody involved. So having a list of items that HR needs from the manager and a timeline for submitting them, having a whole plan for what's going to happen if an employee is injured that they can follow. If you want, as an HR professional, if you want your managers to fill out the first notice of loss, or if they need to give the employee certain documents to take to the clinic, or they have to provide contact information or other employee documentation, the manager has to know about that in advance, because once the employee leaves, they can't change that, right? They also need to know who they're supposed to contact when an incident has occurred and where they're supposed to send the injured worker. So Deb talked about a lot of these things earlier, but having a clear process can make a big difference for a manager, especially one who hasn't had a lot of employee injuries and immediately is going to be put into that position where they have to figure out what to do and they have to make decisions really fast. They can fall back on those procedures and it helps a lot.
So HR can help with employee relations. HR should take the lead in making sure that managers are trained to understand that when employees report an injury, they're not bad employees or they're not assumed to be filing fake claims. HR needs to work with and train managers to try and recognize and avoid bias and not to use negative connotations about workplace injuries and injured employees. Managers need to know that these thoughts or feelings are not beneficial to the company's culture. A helpful statistic is from a Department of Insurance study about work comp claims. Fraud is only about 1 to 2% of the total cost of claims. So the total cost of claims, not the total number, but the total cost. So with it being that low, we don't want to set a tone at our companies that work comp claims are filed by bad employees with fake claims. Let's not use this type of negativity when training managers how to handle claims or employee reports. Instead, we should build a safety culture of caring. Inform employees that reporting unsafe items and hazards or even potential hazards is a positive thing. Then, as the employer, make sure those items are corrected and follow up with the reporting employee. And by acting on, controlling, and correcting hazards, employees will be shown that the employer cares about them and their safety. Better motivation at work leads to better safety teams. Of course, the employer should also regularly remind employees that they are to report injuries promptly, even if they're minor or near misses. This also demonstrates the employer's desire to keep the employees safe and give them the proper treatment they may need. So each of these types of interactions reinforces positive views of safety and the care of employees instead of injuries being viewed in a negative manner. That, of course, is not to say that an employer finds injuries to be a positive, but they can set the stage for positive interactions and a positive safety culture. The accident investigation should keep drilling down on the why an accident or incident happened. The report's outcome shouldn't stop or solely be based on an employee didn't follow the safety guidelines. Why did that employee not follow the safety guidelines? Was the PPE not provided, or did they not have the proper equipment? Was the equipment in disrepair? There's a list of whys, and it's important to keep going back and back and back until you find the answer that is the fundamental reason that the incident occurred. The one thing that if you changed it, it would have created a different outcome. We may not need to go all the way back to creation, but keep asking until you see what the root cause was. Employers should strive to remove those barriers in communications and open pathways for employees to have productive dialogue about safety. Part of that means explaining to the employees why the accident investigation is taking place. It's not to place blame on the employees, it's to find out the root cause of the why. It's to fix the hazard and prevent other injuries.
We had that poll question a few minutes ago where we asked if you investigate near misses, and that pops up right here, right? If we investigate near misses and if we can get employees to tell us when something almost happened, then we can learn about it and put in corrective action so that nobody actually gets hurt from that hazard that obviously exists in the workplace because we had a near miss, right? So having that in place can make a huge difference. And sometimes people feel like, you know, I have so much on my plate, I have so many things to do, I'll investigate when somebody gets hurt. But those near misses can actually be very helpful in preventing employees from getting injured if we do the investigation and we learn from it. And getting your employees to speak up and talk about that is huge. So safety cultures, they're based on transparency, right? When investigations take place, like what Deb was just talking about, or when we put new procedures in place, we need to meet with our employees to provide them with an explanation, right? We need to tell them what we learned in the investigation, listen to their concerns, and explain why different procedures have been implemented. The more they understand, the more likely it is that they're going to follow those procedures. Employees' concerns over changes can actually give you additional input that changes your initial plan, and that input is valuable, right? So hearing what they have to say and why they think it will work or why they think it won't work means that you might need to adjust your plan, but having those conversations reinforces that you want to hear from your employees, that you want to do the right thing for them, that you're trying to make sure that they're safe. To have a safety culture, you have to listen to those other points of view, and you have to incorporate that information into your overall plan. That safety communication has to go both ways, right? That's an OSHA requirement. So you want to hear what your employees are concerned about, and then you've got to do something to address those concerns. We have spoken a couple of times about safety as a company value, right? The reason we talk about safety as a value is because values don't change. They're a compass. They guide our way. They tell us what our expectations are. When companies talk about safety as a priority, the problem with that is priorities do change. Something else can easily become more important, right? One way that you can show that safety is a value is if you make it part of everyone's evaluations. So when complying with your safety rules and engaging in the safety culture is an expectation that every employee is striving to meet, you can actually strengthen your safety culture that way.
So Erica just mentioned recognizing good behavior when you see it. A simple thanks goes a long way. Hey, thanks for wearing your PPE. Thanks for moving that cord out of the walkway. Thanks for using proper lifting technique. Whatever it is, it's good to recognize it. Some organizations have formal recognition programs. That might be as simple as handing out a $5 gift card when people are observed doing the right thing or entering them into a drawing for a prize. You can sponsor lunch for employees to express your gratitude for their dedication to safety. Now, some of you might be wondering about how OSHA looks at recognition programs. And as long as what you're doing isn't such a huge reward that it would discourage someone from reporting an incident, it's acceptable. If employees have to wait an entire year to be rewarded, and the reward is a week-long vacation for 2 in the Caribbean, and any one incident would make everyone ineligible, then you're probably discouraging people from reporting injuries. However, if the reward is lunch or a nominal gift card or a bonus, and eligibility is based on each individual, or it's over a short time period and then restarts, or even if it's just impromptu, hey, I noticed this and I want to recognize you, then you're less likely to have a problem. These programs have to be designed to avoid discouraging employees from reporting accidents, but they can be used to reinforce safe behavior and to express gratitude.
And it's really, really important that we're doing that we're recognizing employees and not just always talking to them about what they're doing wrong, because then they feel like, oh, here comes a safety person, they're going to get on my case about something. Instead of, here comes a safety person, I want to show them what I'm doing, and I have a question for them, and then creating those relationships. So that discussion, right, talking to employees is really important. So remember before I was talking about transparency. The only way we're going to get employees to do what we want them to do is to talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. You have to find the reason that actually motivates them to do the thing that you need them to do. Explaining why you want them to do something can help, right? Logic and reasoning, that can work with some people, but for other people, you're going to have to find other ways to reach them. So I want to talk about a really common issue, safety glasses. A lot of facilities require employees to wear safety glasses when they do certain tasks, and a lot of employees ignore that rule. I see it all the time when I'm walking through facilities. So how do you change that? You want to talk to your employees, right? Explain that you want them to wear their safety glasses because you don't want them to damage their eyes. And if that's not enough, ask them why they don't wear them. Maybe they find them uncomfortable or they keep fogging up. And then try to fix that problem, right? Come back to them and push them to do it again. Hey, We went out and bought these anti-fog wipes that can help to keep your lenses from fogging over. Or we now have 4 different types of safety glasses because we realized that what we had before didn't fit everyone, and we want to make sure that we're giving you guys different options so you're comfortable when you wear your safety glasses. And then at your next safety meeting, if you don't want to focus on safety glasses again because you guys are talking about it all the time, just take one moment from another topic to thank somebody who always wears their safety glasses. If you catch the person who you're always on their case about not wearing their safety glasses, make it a big deal in a way that works for them. So what do I mean by that? Not everybody wants to be called out in a meeting. Some people do. They want you to call them out at a meeting and say, hey, John, thanks a lot for wearing your safety glasses yesterday. I saw you doing it, right? Other people are more shy, so you can thank them one-on-one. Either way, it's still recognition, right? So you're reinforcing it, you're talking about it.
There are a lot of ways to remind employees about your safety rules. We just talked about a few. So bringing up a common problem in safety meetings, for example. Speaking directly with employees is another. Going back to something we got right during COVID, we had posters reminding people how to protect themselves. Everywhere these posters were. A really common reminder that you see at retail stores and restaurants are the signs that say no shirt, no shoes, no service. Clear and to the point. And we have the same types of reminders that we use in safety. I see posters and signs reminding people to use their PPE all the time. It might say safety glasses are required past this point, or this is a hard hat job site. Those are other examples of reminders. And some companies post how many days they've gone without a work-related injury. That's not specific to a safety rule, but it is a reminder that there's a focus on safety at that workplace. So reminders, whether they're verbal or written, can also help to reinforce good behavior.
One of the biggest mistakes you can make if you're a manager or supervisor is if you don't follow your own safety rules. If you're not following the rules, you cannot expect your employees to do anything different. So don't be the manager who doesn't wear the proper PPE when you're on the job site or in the production area. Always, always have your PPE available and set that example for other people. I think that brings us to our last poll question, Michelle.
Yes, and I don't have the verbiage for it, so can one of you read it off?
Oh,
And
this
then
is
I'll...
an easy one.
Sure.
We just want to hear if you guys, yeah, did you learn anything today? Can you share something in the comments or the questions area that you may have learned today?
And while we're waiting for a couple, I'm just going to ask one quick question that somebody had. They want to know if you could share more on Get Well cards. Is it appropriate to have the team write on the card Get Well, or will the individual feel that their privacy has been violated?
Yeah, that's an HR HIPAA question, and I think it's a great question. These are related to workplace injuries, and a lot of employees know that their coworkers were hurt at work, but you can offer a Get Well card without divulging any information about the person's well-being. You know, they know their coworker is off work because they got injured at the workplace, but a Get Well card can be a very nice gesture without compromising HIPAA laws, because you don't have to go into what happened or how severe the injury was or what their progress is or anything like that. You can just merely give them a greeting that shows that the company cares.
Nice. Okay, so we've got a couple of comments, some basics as to how HR and safety teams can collaborate together. Somebody's learned that today. Somebody liked the idea of adding a safety related question to the interview process to gauge the applicant's perspective of safety. How important good communication is. Somebody else liked the idea of investigating near misses. There is little time to do this, but it is a good idea. There was one other question that we had earlier, and I hope I am relaying it correctly. They are a staffing company. So it was at the beginning of the presentation. I believe it was during the interview and hiring process when you guys talked about the attempt to get the applicant's prior experience and feelings about safety. Would that still be, you know, would that still be
Right.
something a staffing company would want to address?
I think I understand the question. A staffing company is hiring personnel to work at other companies. But that doesn't mean that a staffing company doesn't have the responsibility to keep their own employees safe. So yes, a staffing company does have a responsibility to understand the safety culture at the companies that they're placing these employees and the value that these companies are placing on safety, and helping their employees that are going to work in those organizations understand the culture in that organization as well as the safety policies that might exist.
Great,
And I
thank
think
you.
even as a staffing company, they're still your employees. You generally are covering them for workers' comp, right? Their activities affect you as an organization. So knowing that they have the right mindset towards safety is actually protecting yourself too.
Right.
Great. A couple more comments about what people learned. They liked reinforcing safety acts and culture. Another person liked the idea of designating the medical facility the company uses, establishing relationships on your care emergency responders. And then going along the lines, this is going to add on to the staffing. For a staffing firm, would we follow the same guidelines even though we are sending them to a host company? We ask the questions and do the walkthroughs and deal with incidents, near misses, but how do we continue to follow up with the host to make sure they're following the same safety standards we have?
Yeah, it's communication early, often, and keeping it reinforced. And so if you know that you're sending your employee that's covered by your work comp claim into an unsafe environment, that's something that you need to address with the host company. And this goes back to the beginning of your relationship with that host company, understanding what their safety culture is all about and making sure that their safety culture aligns with what your expectations are for your employees, and making sure that your employees understand the expectations as well.
And I
Great,
think
thanks.
it's fair for you to tell your employees that if they don't feel safe, that they think they're being asked to do something that puts them at risk, they should reach out to you and let you know so you can address it. But Deb is right? You want to build it into your relationship from the very beginning, whether it's in a contract or another way, so that they know that you're not going to ask your employees to do things that aren't safe, and that you reserve the right to take them off the job if they're put at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really good questions. A little bit specific, but really good questions.
Yep. And it does apply to, even though this is specific to a staffing company, it does apply to every company. You should establish your safety culture and safety expectations when you're establishing your company, really.
Yes.
So.
All right, so we started this conversation by pointing out some of the areas and the goals that safety and human resources share. And then we went on to discuss how if we work together on these, those shared points can actually improve our results, right, in both departments. With hiring new employees, safety has to be a little bit more involved to help find the right people, to ensure that those safety expectations are set right up front. And then from there, we jump to another common intersection, those accidents and claims, right? And we talked about how HR can help safety with planning ahead for the worst, how safety can include HR on investigation, and how the two can share information and work together to resolve the claim by actively caring for the injured worker, tracking the progress of the claim, and then trying to bring that person back to work as soon as possible. And finally, we talked about manager responsibilities, understanding protocols, and using positive reinforcement to get better results. And we called this the intersection of safety and HR. But the reality is that there's a lot of overlap between these two departments. To have a successful safety program and culture, HR and safety have to work together, whether that's two departments working together, or that's an HR person who's working with an operations manager, or sometimes HR and safety are all one person and it's all in their lap. But pulling that information together so that you're thinking about them not as separate things, but how they interact, right? That helps. We hope that we gave you some ideas for how to use each other to reach your goals, because we're actually all better together. And with that,
Erica,
Michelle, I think, go ahead.
I know we have a couple of minutes left. I did find an example of how safety and HR should be working together from recent news, if you want me to share that.
That is great. Please share.
So this happened in the floods in North Carolina. There are some lawsuits because of some wrongful death that happened in the workplaces. And what transpired was a lot of confusion on the part of the employees as far as what their responsibility was to the company in the face of a natural disaster. Should they be protecting the company, or should they be exiting the company and going home? And there were not in the cases that were cited, there were not clear definitions in the employee policy manual, in the company's policies, about when employees are excused in the face of a natural disaster, when the employees are excused from work. And so that confusion really did not help the situation at all. It actually caused even bigger disasters to some families. And so to have clear policies about how your employees and your company responds to a natural disaster is imperative. And we might think that, well, we're not in a flood zone, that will never happen to us. But look at all the companies right now in Los Angeles that are fighting fires, and understanding how those employees should be behaving in their safety culture at work in the face of a natural disaster. A natural disaster can strike anywhere at any time. So having clear policies that are communicated to your employee about what the expectations are in a natural disaster could prevent death.
Yeah, and I think having a way to communicate with your employees, when it happens, right? We know that there's going to be a problem in your area. We want you to move out of that area, or we're going to close today, or we're going to close this afternoon because it's too risky. We want to make sure that you're okay. Can you please check in so we know that you're okay today? So that communication level is important too. Planning ahead, making sure, like Deb is pointing out, that they know when they're expected to do something to help the company, but also that they should be protecting themselves. So if it's not safe to stay, then they should feel like they can go, right? Sometimes employees just feel like they are not allowed to leave because they're supposed to be at work. And I think that was part of what happened with some of those things in North Carolina. But certainly with the fires that we're seeing, another thing to think about is, even if you're not in an area where there are fires burning, some areas are still affected by smoke. So is it safe for your employees who work outside, or should they not be doing that right now? Are they comfortable reaching out to you and saying, hey, it's really smoky here. Do you think we can come back and work on this job tomorrow? Or maybe we can go to this other area and work today, right? So encouraging them to talk to you is so important with those emergencies and natural disasters.
Good point.
Great. Well, thank you all for attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. Thank you, Erica and Deb, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of your time. Please be sure to join us on February 4th for our Diversity, Inclusion, and Implicit Bias webinar. Thank you all and have a safe day.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Erica.
Thanks, Deb and Michelle.